You won't believe what I just watched. My own camera caught Bigfoot just 10 feet away, and I had no idea the Sasquatch was even there. Every second of that footage is pure terror, but it's the moment in the trees that still haunts me, because I almost made a brutal mistake. I'm watching the clip from the beginning, and the trail looks empty. Clear sky through the canopy, maybe 60 degrees. The kind of October morning that makes you feel like you own the forest. My footsteps are steady. My breathing is calm. The GoPro captures everything with the crisp indifference of a machine that doesn't feel fear. And right there in the frame behind me, in the 10th minute, 43 seconds, about 40 yards away, something is standing completely still in the tree line. I didn't see it when I was walking. I see it now. Tall, dark, built like something that has never once been afraid of anything alive. Bigfoot had already been there for who knows how long, watching me move down that trail like it. Was studying how I walked. The shape of it is wrong in a way that's hard to explain without sounding like you've lost your mind. It wasn't the silhouette of a bear. It wasn't the broken canopy playing tricks on shadows. Sasquatch was upright, composed, and deliberately positioned just far enough inside the tree line to be invisible, unless you knew exactly what to look for. I've gone back to that frame dozens of times now, zooming in until the image breaks apart into pixels. And every time I come back to the same conclusion. Whatever was standing there, it had chosen that spot on purpose. There was nothing accidental about its position. The angle, the cover, the stillness, that takes thought. Back on the trail in real time, I had no idea. The footage shows me walking at a comfortable pace, occasionally glancing at the ground to watch my footing, pausing once to check my phone for a signal that wasn't there. Standard stuff. But the audio on the GoPro is better than I remembered. And when I crank the volume and listen closely, I can already hear it. Faint but rhythmic low-frequency clicks coming from somewhere in the trees to my left. It wasn't birds nor insects. It was something deliberate, the kind of sound that lives at the bottom of your ear before it registers as a sound at all. Was that click meant to warn me or lure me? I remember stopping. The footage confirms it. I planted both feet and stood there for almost 20 seconds, head tilted, scanning the tree line to my left. Nothing moved. Nothing was visible. And here's what gets me when I watch it back now. I was looking in exactly the wrong direction. Based on Bigfoot's position the first time the camera caught a glimpse of it, I have a feeling that the Sasquatch was behind me and slightly right, motionless, watching me search for it in the wrong quadrant of forest. I was so confident in my instincts pointing me left that I never thought to turn fully around. Sasquatch used that. Whether it was conscious misdirection or just patience, the result was the same. I looked, found nothing, and kept walking. That's when I reached up and adjusted the GoPro. The clip shows my hand crossing the lens, and for half a second, the camera tilts upward at about 30 degrees, catching the mid-canopy instead of the trail. And I have watched that half-second frame by frame more times than I can count, because that's when Bigfoot appears again. Higher now, not on the ground. Sasquatch is in the lower branches of a large oak, maybe 40 feet off the trail, perched in a position that makes zero anatomical sense for something that must weigh upward of 500 pounds. But there it is. And the face. The face is what I can't let go of. It's turned directly toward the camera, not toward me, toward the lens, as if it understood what the lens was. The eyes are deep set and dark, and there is nothing blank about them. That's the thing I keep coming back to. Bigfoot looked like it was thinking. I reattached the mount. The camera leveled back out, and the trail snapped back into frame. And immediately, the clicking returned. But this time, it was louder. The gap between each click had shortened, or maybe it was coming from closer, or both. My body language in the footage shifts visibly. My shoulders come up half an inch. My stride gets tighter. I start scanning left and right with short glances instead of steady forward focus. I know that posture. That's the posture of someone whose nervous system is sending massive red flags that their conscious brain hasn't sorted into words yet. I think that's the moment my instincts started clocking in ahead of my thoughts. I just hadn't caught up yet, and Bigfoot was still right there behind me, closing the gap by degrees. How much closer could it get before I realized I was being hunted? I've spent time in thick backcountry. I've camped alone at elevation, hiked out at 3 in the morning, navigated by feel more than once. The woods have never made me feel small. That changed on this trail, on this morning, and I can pinpoint the exact moment in the footage, the moment my stride broke. Not a stumble, not a stop. Just a half-second hesitation in the rhythm, the kind your body makes when the math stops adding up. One foot came down a little softer than it should have. I picked up my pace. Not running, not yet, but moving with the kind of urgency that doesn't come from logic. It comes from somewhere older than logic. The footage starts to shake now. Not badly, just enough to tell you the gait has changed. I'm moving somewhere between a fast walk and a trot, and my head is doing that thing where it keeps flicking backward without fully committing to a look. I remember the feeling exactly. I wanted to look back, and I didn't want to look back, because somewhere in the meat of my brain, I already suspected that looking back would show me something I couldn't unsee. So I kept moving, and Bigfoot kept moving too. What happens next in the footage is the part I had to watch 4 times before I could accept what I was seeing. I had pushed my pace up to something close to a jog, and the camera was bobbing enough to make the background choppy, but not so choppy that you miss it. Behind me, maybe 30 feet back, a shape moves between 2 tree trunks. One smooth, unhurried stride. The spacing between those trunks was at least 8 feet across. Bigfoot cleared that gap in a single step. Not a leap, but just a step. And in the brief moment when the shape was fully visible between the trees, upright, broad, moving with the fluid indifference of something that does not need to rush, I could see it wasn't running. It was walking, just walking, keeping pace with a human jogging. I honestly think, watching it now, that Bigfoot could have caught me whenever it decided to. It was toying with me. That's the thought that sits in my chest like a stone. Was this predator simply patient, or testing me for something worse? Growing up Navajo, I'd been taught to trust the land and to respect what watches from it. Something about the clicks and low rustles behind me set my nerves screaming. I knew this forest better than most. Every fallen log, every narrow deer path was mapped in my head. If I stayed on the main paved trail, it would take at least 20 minutes to reach the parking area. But cutting through this older, tighter forest, I could shave off almost 10 minutes. 10 minutes didn't seem like much, but when Bigfoot is closing in at a pace you can't measure, 10 minutes could be the difference between getting out and getting caught. I made the turn without hesitation, but it wasn't just instinct. My feet carried me left before my mind even fully caught up. I cut hard off the main trail. There's a deer path I've used before, cuts diagonally through a section of older forest and shaves almost a quarter mile off the route back to the parking area. Tighter canopy, rougher ground, but faster if you know it. I knew it. I took it without slowing down, ducking the first low branch by memory and hitting the uneven ground of the old deer path at full stride. The terrain got worse immediately. Exposed roots, soft spots where the soil had gone damp from a creek runoff somewhere below. Branches at shin level that caught my feet if I wasn't lifting high enough. The GoPro captured all of it, the world swinging and jerking as I worked through the brush, my breathing now audible on the mic, ragged but controlled. And then the clicking stopped, just stopped, mid-sequence, as if a switch had been thrown. And the silence that replaced it was worse. Because silence in a forest that has been making sound means something decided to go quiet. I felt the change in the air before I processed the audio shift. Everything around me became very still in the way that prey animals go still when something large has just entered their space. What filled the silence instead was something lower, a rhythmic sound I don't have a clean word for. Not a vocalization, not a knock. More like a deep, resonant pressure that hit the chest before the ears. It was spaced out and deliberate. It felt less like communication and more like the sound of something that knew I could hear it and wanted me to know that. I'm not someone who leans into the dramatic, but I will say this plainly. It felt like Bigfoot was controlling the pace. Like the Sasquatch had shifted from observation to something more intentional and was marking time as it came. Was it orchestrating my every move, step by step? I was moving hard through the deer path when I made my worst decision. I slowed down, just a fraction, just enough to try to get a bearing on where the sound was coming from. And in that half second of reduced speed, I turned my head back over my left shoulder. The camera caught what my eyes caught. Bigfoot was there. Not 30 feet back this time. Not a silhouette between trees. Close enough that I could make out the mass of it moving through the brush toward me with a kind of steady, ground-eating locomotion that looked nothing like a run, but covered ground like one. Sasquatch wasn't hesitating. It wasn't stopping to observe. It was advancing. And the distance between us had collapsed to something that made the word escape feel suddenly fragile. I took off in a full sprint. No more pacing. No more managing my footing on the uneven ground. I just went, and I accepted every stumble and root catch as the cost of forward motion. The GoPro footage from this stretch is chaotic. Sky, ground, branches, blur. But there are frames where the background stabilizes just long enough to see behind me. And in 2 of those frames, Bigfoot is visible, moving through the brush in long, smooth strides, angled toward me, not away. Sasquatch wasn't spooked by the sprint. It responded to it. The pace increased. There was no frantic energy in those strides, no sign of exertion, just the mechanical, metronomic movement of something that was built for this, in terrain that it had known far longer than I had. And the scariest part? He was 10 feet away from me. I've never felt fear like that in my life. I want to be specific about that. I've been in situations in the backcountry that were objectively more dangerous. A rockfall at elevation, a flash flood in a desert canyon, a close encounter with a black bear that ended fine but escalated fast. In all of those, the fear was manageable because the threat followed rules I understood. This was different. This was the specific terror of being pursued by something that was better at the terrain than I was, faster than I was, and not behaving like anything I had a category for. How do you survive when the rules themselves have changed? Then the rocks started. The first one hit the ground to my right with a crack that I felt in my teeth. Not a random falling branch, not a tumbling stone dislodged by movement upstream. It came in from the side, horizontal, at knee height, and struck a root hard enough to split it. I didn't stop. The second one caught my shoulder. It wasn't massive, maybe the size of a baseball, but it hit with enough force to send a spike of pain down into my elbow and throw my balance just enough to make me grab a sapling for support. I used the sapling to pivot and keep my momentum going without going down. The third one caught me in the upper back, mid-stride, and that one nearly buckled me. Bigfoot was throwing them, not rolling them, not kicking them loose. Full on, actually throwing them. Overhead with accuracy, while in motion through heavy brush. I can't tell you exactly how I know the difference, but I know it the same way you know when a punch is aimed versus when it's wild. The rocks were landing in front of me, and beside me, and behind me, and the pattern wasn't random scatter, it was bracketing. Sasquatch was boxing in my path, throwing ahead of where I was headed to steer me. I stumbled over a root, went down on one knee, got back up in what felt like the same motion, and kept running. That's when it landed. Not as a thought at first, more as a sensation, a wrongness in the geometry of where I was versus where I should have been. I'd been running this deer path for almost 4 minutes, and I should have been breaking into the secondary fire road by now. I should have been able to see the open sky ahead through the canopy thinning. Instead, the trees were getting denser. The ground was rising. I was heading northeast instead of northwest, and the only way I had gotten there was by following the path of least resistance. When the rocks came in from the sides, had I already been trapped without realizing it? I wasn't escaping. I was being steered. Every time I'd had to dodge, right when a rock hit my left when one hit ahead of me to the right. I had turned, incrementally away from the exit. Sasquatch hadn't been trying to hit me cleanly. It had been redirecting me. The rocks were a herding tool. I was deep in the denser section of the forest now, the canopy thick enough that it had dropped the ambient light by a full level, and I had zero visual on any recognizable landmark. I was exactly where Bigfoot wanted me, and it stopped feeling like a chase. It started feeling like something else, something with an endpoint where I am deep in the forest, dead. I forced myself to stop running and think for 3 seconds. 3 seconds, which felt like 3 hours. I pulled up the mental map of the area. The creek ran south, the ridge was east, the parking lot was west and low. I needed to go downhill and left, regardless of what that put between me and whatever was in those trees. I adjusted course, pushing through brush now, instead of following the path, taking the harder route, because the harder route was the right one. Then the rocks stopped entirely, and Bigfoot closed the distance. I know this because I heard it. Not footsteps, not snapping branches, but a single heavy impact on the ground, maybe 15 feet behind me, like something had dropped its full weight forward in one lunge. The sound was so massive and so close that my legs nearly gave out. I didn't look back. I couldn't afford to. I just pushed every last thing I had into my legs and ran harder than I have ever run in my life. And the GoPro footage confirms it. The camera shaking so violently that only every fourth or fifth frame is even decipherable. Was I about to find out just how close it could really get? The footage shows me stumbling badly over an exposed root, catching myself on a tree trunk with my forearm hard enough to leave a bruise that still hurts as I watch this. What the mic caught at that exact moment is something I've had to listen to a dozen times to fully accept. A sound directly behind me, guttural and low. Not a roar, not a scream, just a single deep exhalation of something that was right there. Not 30 feet back, not 20, it was right there. The GoPro audio puts it at maybe 8 feet. If I had gone down on that route, I don't think I would have gotten back up. I hit a slope without warning and went with it, half running, half sliding down a 15-foot grade of loose shale and dead leaves, grabbing at anything to stay upright. My right knee went into the ground, came back up, and I was still moving. That's what the body does when everything else switches off. The slope angled me south, and I took it, because south was away, and away was the only direction that mattered. Behind me on that slope, the footage catches a shape dropping into the upper edge of the frame. Not sliding, not stumbling. It was controlled. Sasquatch came down that grade like it had done it 1,000 times. The trees thinned just slightly ahead. Not a clearing, just older growth with more space between trunks. And I hit that section at full sprint. That's when Bigfoot made its move. The footage shows a shadow crossing fast from my right, cutting in at an angle, closing the gap with sudden acceleration I hadn't seen from it before. Sasquatch had been pacing itself. The whole time, it had been pacing itself. And now it wasn't. Could I survive a sudden burst from something built to outlast me? But before we get into that, you need to see this. Because I found something else while watching this footage. Evidence and more discoveries that I can't put on YouTube. Things that were taken down, ignored, or completely removed. I gathered everything into one file. If you want to see it, it's in the description. Now back to the story. I screamed. Didn't plan to. It just came out, raw and primal, captured perfectly on the GoPro mic. I cut left so hard my feet nearly crossed, and I almost went down, barely staying upright, through something closer to controlled falling than running. Bigfoot adjusted instantly. The footage shows the shadow shifting course to match me, the gap now under 20 feet, the canopy shaking from its movement overhead in one frame. Overhead, like it had used a low branch as a pivot point. The geometry of it didn't make sense for something that size, and it didn't matter because it was happening. My lungs were burning in a way I hadn't felt ever. The footing was wet from creek drainage seeping up through the soil, and every third step my foot slid before catching. I could feel Bigfoot back there, not as a sound anymore, but as pressure. The way air moves differently when something large displaces it. Sasquatch was close enough that I could feel the wake of it. I've told people this, and they look at me like I'm exaggerating. I'm not. A branch caught me across the face, one I ran directly into at full speed, split my lower lip, and filled my mouth with blood. I didn't slow down. My vision went briefly white at the edges, and I didn't slow down. The footage from this stretch is almost unusable, just violent shaking and strobing light through branches, but in one clear frame, you can see Bigfoot's arm, not its whole body. Its arm extended, reaching. It was close enough to reach. That frame is the one I can barely look at because the hand is open. I would have been gone. I don't know if I made a sound when I saw what was ahead. A gray light through the trees, diffuse, flat, the specific quality of light that means open sky and open ground. A clearing. I hit the brush at the edge without slowing, ducked under a low branch by instinct, and exploded out the other side at a dead sprint and ran directly into a human being. The collision was violent. I hit him shoulder first at full running speed, and we both went down, him backwards into a tarp of gear, me rolling hard over his torso and landing on my hands in the dirt. Two other men spun around at the sound, and for one suspended second everybody froze. Me on the ground, blood on my lip, chest heaving, him flat on his back in his own equipment, the other two with their hands halfway to things at their hips. The gear on the tarp was not recreational. Poachers, mid-setup, and I had crashed into the middle of their operation like a man falling out of the sky. Nobody said anything for a long moment. Then one of them barked something low at the others, and they all turned toward the tree line I'd just come through. I turned too. Nothing. No sound. No movement. No shape at the edge of the clearing. Bigfoot was gone. Fully, completely gone. As if the sight of armed humans had ended the calculation mid-step. I stood there with my hands shaking and understood with total clarity that I had not made it out because I outran something. I made it out because something decided to stop. I pulled the footage that night. I watched it 3 times straight through and couldn't sleep. What I found in those early frames, Bigfoot already there, 10 feet behind me. Watching didn't shock me. What shocked me was the last frame. Sasquatch in the trees, eyes locked on me, arm reaching forward as if it could snatch me at any second. Watching it now, I can still feel that intent pressing in. And I know, if I'd hesitated for even a second, Bigfoot would have finished the job. That's the part that haunts me.